Picture yourself standing at the entrance of a cave. It is pitch black inside. You have no flashlight, no phone. The only light you have is a small animal fat lamp that flickers and threatens to go out with every breath you take. You could turn back. You probably should. But instead, you walk in deeper, much deeper. And then, in the trembling glow of that tiny flame, you begin to paint. That is not a metaphor. That is exactly what your ancestors did. Tens of thousands of years ago, in total darkness, in the most inhospitable parts of the earth, human beings crawled through narrow tunnels, squeezed past rock walls, and descended hundreds of meters underground just to make art. Not art for anyone to see. Not art in a public square or on a sunlit cliff face. Art buried deep inside the belly of the earth, in places that took hours to reach and cost real physical danger to enter. For over a century, scientists assumed they understood why. The cave paintings were religious rituals, hunting magic, a way to control the animals drawn on the walls, to summon them, to guarantee the hunt would succeed. It was a tidy explanation. It fit the era. It made ancient humans feel familiar, almost logical. But when researchers began studying the caves more carefully, something started to crack. The animals painted most often on cave walls were not the animals most commonly eaten. The animals most frequently hunted left almost no trace on the walls at all. The hunting magic theory began to fall apart. And what replaced it is far stranger, far more human, and far closer to something you recognize in yourself than you would ever expect. Your ancestors were not painting to control the world outside. They were painting because of something happening inside their own minds. The cave of Lascaux in southern France was rediscovered in 1940 by a group of teenagers who stumbled in after their dog. What they found inside stopped them cold. Hundreds of paintings. Bulls, horses, deer, a rhinoceros, a wounded man. Images of breathtaking sophistication painted 17,000 years ago. The sheer scale of it, the detail, the sense of movement in the animals, all of it suggested that whoever made these images was not primitive in any meaningful sense of the word. They were thinking, feeling, deliberating human beings. They had chosen this place. They had returned to it. They had spent time here in the dark making something beautiful. But Lascaux is not even the oldest. In 2014, researchers working in the caves of Sulawesi in Indonesia discovered paintings that had been dated to at least 45,000 years ago. A pig deer, drawn in red ochre, pressed against a limestone wall that had not been touched since the last ice age. Archaeologist Adam Brum and his team published their findings, and the scientific world had to reckon with something uncomfortable. Cave art was not a European invention. It was not a local tradition. It appeared to be a universal human impulse, emerging independently across tens of thousands of miles on opposite ends of the earth at roughly the same time. That is not a coincidence. That is biology. Cognitive archaeologist Ian Morley has spent decades studying the conditions under which early humans began making art, and one of his central arguments is that the emergence of symbolic thinking and the emergence of art are not two separate events. They are the same event. When the human brain became capable of holding a symbol in mind, of understanding that a mark on a wall could stand for something real, it also became capable of all the things that followed. Language, planning, memory, culture. The cave paintings were not the byproduct of a new kind of thinking. They were the first proof of it. But that still does not explain the darkness. Think about what it means to carry a lamp into a cave. You are choosing to move into an environment your body does not want to be in. Every instinct you have evolved over millions of years is telling you to stay near the light, to stay where you can see predators, to stay where escape is possible. The cave is the opposite of all of that. It is cold, it is silent in a way that feels almost physical, and it is dark in a way that sunlight never quite allows you to forget is possible. There is no residual glow in a deep cave. When the lamp goes out, you cannot see your own hand. Neurologist David Lewis Williams offered one of the most compelling explanations for why the darkness mattered. His research into altered states of consciousness and their relationship to prehistoric art suggested something that changed how many archaeologists think about these sites. The deep cave, he argued, was not just a canvas. It was a technology for altering the mind. In total sensory deprivation, in the flickering half-light of an animal fat lamp, after hours of physical exertion crawling through tight stone passages, the human brain begins to do something remarkable. It starts to hallucinate. Not dramatically, not violently, but in the gentle luminous way that the mind produces images when it is deprived of external input. geometric patterns, moving shapes, animals that seemed to breathe and shift against the rock face. The cave wall, Lewis Williams proposed, was understood not as a blank surface but as a membrane, a thin boundary between the visible world and whatever lay behind it. The animals painted there were not invented. They were seen. They were traced from visions that flickered at the edge of consciousness, in the deep dark, in the silence, in the altered state that the cave itself produced. Your ancestors were not decorating, they were documenting. There is something else that the paintings reveal which took a long time for researchers to understand. Many of the handprints found in caves around the world are not full handprints. They are stenciled outlines, made by pressing a hand against the wall and blowing pigment around it. And when archaeologist Dean Snow analyzed a large sample of these handprints from sites in France and Spain, he found something that nobody expected. The majority of them, based on the relative lengths of the fingers and the ratio of the index finger to the ring finger, appeared to belong to women. Not hunters. Not shamans. Not the alpha males of popular imagination. Women. Women who had crawled into the dark, pressed their hands against stone walls, and blown ochre and charcoal around their fingers to leave a mark that would survive for 30,000 years. That should change something in how you picture the scene. It was not one kind of person making these images. It was not one purpose driving them. The caves were used over vast stretches of time, sometimes thousands of years apart, by different groups of people who nevertheless returned to the same walls, added to the same images, chose the same deep, dark, difficult locations. Something about the experience pulled generation after generation back into the earth. Something about the act of marking a surface in the dark, of being present in a place that ordinary life never touched, felt worth the cost. And here is the part that reaches across 40,000 years and lands somewhere inside you right now. You still do this, not in caves, obviously. But the impulse that drove your ancestors underground is not gone. It has simply found new containers. The musician who records in a soundproofed room at 2 in the morning, when the house is quiet and the outside world has finally gone silent. The writer who can only work in complete darkness or with headphones blocking out every sound. The child who builds a fort out of blankets and climbs inside to draw. The person who stands in front of a blank canvas and feels something rise up from somewhere they cannot name and puts it onto a surface before it disappears. The cave was never really about the animals on the wall. It was about the act itself, the going under, the choosing of darkness, the discovery that in the place where your body is most afraid, your mind becomes most alive. 45,000 years ago, someone crawled into the earth with a small lamp and a handful of pigment and pressed their hand against a stone wall. They were not primitive. They were not superstitious. They were doing exactly what you do when the world gets too loud and you find the one quiet place where something in you finally has room to speak. The cave is still there. You just know it by a different name now.